Imagine you are walking toward the city that rules the world. The year is 645 BC. For 3 days, you have been traveling north along the eastern bank of the Tigris, through a land so thick with orchards and grain fields and irrigation channels that it seems impossible this was once a desert. Caravans pass you going the other way, heading south to Babylon and east to the Zagros. Soldiers ride past in small groups, bearded men in scale armor on short, muscular horses. And then, late in the afternoon of the third day, you come around the shoulder of a low hill, and you see it. Walls. Walls the color of baked clay, running for miles in both directions along the riverbank, so high that the watchtowers on top look like a second city built in the sky. Behind the walls, the smoke of 10,000 kitchen fires. Above the smoke, the square-stepped outlines of temple towers and palace terraces. And rising above everything, crowning the highest mound inside the walls, the gleaming white facade of a building so large it does not look like a building at all. It looks like a small mountain that someone has carved into rooms. This is Nineveh. Not the ruin in the desert that archaeologists will someday dig up. Not the moral fable the Hebrew prophets will curse with such relish that its name becomes a synonym for doomed arrogance. This is the real, functioning, living city, the capital of the neo-Assyrian Empire at the absolute peak of its power, the largest settlement on Earth, home to perhaps 150,000 people, and the seat of a king who, in this year, controls more territory than any human being has ever controlled before. The road takes you toward a gate called the Nergal Gate, named for the god of war. Standing in the entrance arch, twice the height of a man and carved from single blocks of gypsum alabaster, are 2 guardians. Human heads, the horned crowns of gods, the wings of eagles, and the bodies of bulls. 5 legs each, so that from any angle they appear to be either standing still or walking forward. Their eyes are the size of dinner plates. These are lamassu. They are said to prevent evil from crossing the threshold. In 645 BC, nobody has yet invented a kind of evil that Nineveh is afraid of. What you are about to see is an AI reconstruction of this city, built from the excavated foundations under modern Mosul, from the tens of thousands of clay tablets recovered from the ruins, and from the reliefs carved into the palace walls, which showed the Assyrians exactly as they wanted to be remembered. This is the city that perfected the art of terror. And in 28 years, it will be ash. The first thing any visitor to Nineveh encounters is the walls, and the walls are not a defense, they are an advertisement. The circuit is 12 kilometers long, enclosing an area of roughly 750 hectares. The wall itself, built by Sinakaribb roughly 80 years before our visit, stands 25 meters high and 15 meters thick at its base, faced with fitted stone blocks over a mud brick core. A dry moat runs along the outside. Inside, a paved sentry walk wide enough for a chariot runs the entire length of the top. 15 great gates pierce the walls. Each one is named for a god, each one flanked by its own pair of colossal lamassu. The Mashki Gate, the Shamash Gate, the Adad Gate, the Halsey Gate, the Nergal Gate through which you have just passed. Every gate has a toll house, a garrison, and an archive where the scribes record everything that comes in or goes out on clay tablets that will be fired, stamped, and filed. Once a city grows this large, the hardest problem is not defense. It is water. There is no major river inside the walls. The Tigris passes the western side, but the city itself is built on terraces above the river, too high for its water to be easily lifted. To feed 150,000 people through the long, brutal Mesopotamian summer, Sinakaribb and his engineers built something that no one in the ancient world had ever attempted. They went into the mountains. 50 miles northeast of Nineveh, in the rocky uplands of the Zagros foothills, they dammed the streams that flowed down from the snow. They cut channels into the hillsides. They built an aqueduct at Jerwan, made of 2 million precisely dressed limestone blocks that carried the water across a wide valley on 5 stone arches. The total length of the canal system is 95 kilometers. It took tens of thousands of laborers to complete, and when it was finished, the water arrived in Nineveh clean and cold. There is some evidence, fiercely debated by modern scholars, that part of this water supply was used to irrigate a vast terraced garden next to the palace. A garden described by later writers as a mountain of green lifted above the city. Some historians now believe this was the real hanging gardens of the ancient wonder lists, and that later generations confused Nineveh with Babylon. Whether or not that is true, the engineering is undeniable. The Assyrians understood, before almost anyone else, that if you want a city to rule the world, the first thing you have to rule is the water. The man who built these walls and brought this water, who tore down the older capital and moved the center of the empire here, was not the current king. He has been dead for 36 years. His name was Sinakaribb. His presence is everywhere. Every brick in these walls carries his stamp. Every relief in the palace above you was commissioned by him or by his grandson. Every canal, every paved avenue, every one of the 15 gates was either dug, paved, or raised by order of his work crews between the years 703 and 690 BC. Sennacherib came to the throne in 705 BC, inheriting an empire his father Sargon II had already built into the most feared military machine on earth. Sargon had died in battle in an eastern campaign, an omen the superstitious Assyrians found catastrophic. Sennacherib abandoned his father's cursed new capital of Dur-Sharrukin and moved the center of the empire here to Nineveh, where he had lived as crown prince. His 24-year reign was defined by two things. The first was conquest. He crushed Babylon in 689 BC so completely that he had the city flooded by diverting the Euphrates, an act of religious horror that, according to his own priests, the gods would eventually punish. He marched into the Levant and, in 701 BC, besieged and destroyed the Judean fortress of Lachish, deporting its population and extracting tribute from the king of Judah in Jerusalem. That campaign is recorded in enormous detail on the reliefs of his palace. It is also recorded, with a very different emphasis, in the Hebrew Book of Kings. The second obsession was building. Sennacherib called his new palace on Kuyunjik the palace without rival. He meant it literally. 500 meters by 250, 80 rooms, 2,000 slabs of carved stone reliefs lining the walls, a main axis a third of a mile long, bronze columns resting on the backs of solid bronze lions and bulls, each one weighing 43 tons. Then, in 681 BC, two of his sons murdered him in a temple. The king who had flooded Babylon was stabbed to death in front of the statue of his own god. His youngest son, Esarhaddon, seized the throne and inherited the city. Esarhaddon added an arsenal on the southern mound and launched the first Assyrian conquest of Egypt before dying on the road home in 669 BC. The throne then passed to his son. And that son, who is the reason you are walking through Nineveh in 645 BC, is about to become the most important king in the history of the ancient Near East. His name is Ashurbanipal. He is 40 years old. He has ruled for 23 years. He controls every significant city between the Nile and the Persian Gulf. And unlike almost every king who came before him, he can read and write. Ashurbanipal was not supposed to be king. His older brother, Shamash-Shum-Ukin, was the heir. Ashurbanipal was raised for the priesthood and the scribal arts, given a full education in Sumerian and Akkadian cuneiform, trained in mathematics, astronomy, and the complicated ritual sciences that governed the relationship between the Assyrian king and his gods. When Esarhaddon changed his mind on his deathbed and made Ashurbanipal king of Assyria while leaving Babylon to the older brother, he created a scholar king. This turns out to matter in ways nobody anticipates. Ashurbanipal's palace is the second great palace on the Kuyunjik mound. Smaller than his grandfather's, but more refined, its walls are lined with reliefs showing the king doing two things. The first is killing lions. The second is reading books. The lion hunt reliefs are among the most extraordinary images produced in the ancient world. They show Ashurbanipal on horseback, on foot, and in his chariot, loosing arrows into the bodies of lions released from cages one by one into a walled arena. The lions are depicted with a realism that will not be matched in stone carving for another 2,000 years. A wounded lioness drags her paralyzed hind legs behind her across the sand. A dying male coughs blood. The king's face is utterly calm. This is not sport. It is a ritual in which the king, who is the representative of the gods on earth, physically demonstrates his mastery over chaos. The reading reliefs are quieter but arguably more radical. They show the king holding a stylus and a clay tablet, an Assyrian king depicted in the act of writing. No other empire in the ancient world permits this image. In Egypt, in Babylon, in the kingdoms that Assyria is crushing, writing is something the king's servants do. Ashurbanipal wants the world to know that he, personally, can read the cuneiform that no one else in the royal family before him could decipher. And he has used this literacy for something unprecedented. In rooms attached to his palace, in the temple of the god Nabu, and in at least 2 other locations across the citadel, Ashurbanipal has assembled a library, the largest library the world has ever seen. He sent agents across the empire with explicit orders to find every tablet of any importance, have it copied if the owner would not part with it, or have it seized if the owner refused. Letters survive from these scribal missions, and they are remarkable documents. The king wants the tablets on exorcism. He wants the tablets on medicine. He wants the commentaries on omens. He wants the Sumerian literature, the Akkadian epics, the Babylonian astronomy, the mathematical tables, the dictionaries, the lexical lists, and above all, he wants the full text of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is already 1,000 years old when his scribes copy it onto the tablets that are now filed in his palace. There are more than 30,000 tablets in this library in 645 BC. Some of them are so fragile that they are stored in wooden boxes or clay jars with identifying labels. The tablets are organized by genre, by language, by the temple of origin. A catalog system exists. A checkout system for palace scholars exists. This is not a decoration. It is a working research collection. When modern archaeologists dig up this library 25 centuries from now, it will rewrite what the world knows about Mesopotamia. The Epic of Gilgamesh, forgotten for 2,000 years, will be decoded from its tablets. The biblical flood narrative will turn out to be a Mesopotamian story older than the Hebrews. Everything that makes Babylon and Assyria real to modern readers survives because this one king, in this one city, decided to hoard the written record of his civilization. Beyond the palaces, the city spreads out across the terraces of the Kuyunjik and Nebi Yunus mounds and down onto the plain. Nineveh in 645 BC is one of the most cosmopolitan places in the ancient world and one of the most carefully planned. The main avenues, paved with stone, are wide enough for 4 chariots abreast. Sinakaribb's royal decree fixed their width at 60 cubits, roughly 30 meters, and made it a capital offense for any citizen to build an extension of his house that narrowed them. The avenues run straight through the city from gate to gate, and at their intersections stand stone markers inscribed with curses against anyone who disturbs them. Off the main avenues run narrower streets lined with the flat-roofed mud brick houses of ordinary Ninevites. The houses are built around small internal courtyards with ground-floor storerooms, second-floor living quarters, and rooftop terraces where families sleep in the summer heat. Drainage channels run down the middle of each street. The city has a building code, it has a sanitation department, it has a municipal night watch that patrols the walls from dusk to dawn. Inside these walls live native Assyrians, deported populations from every corner of the empire, Aramean merchants who dominate the caravan trade, Phoenician craftsmen making ivory inlays for the palaces, Medes and Elamites selling horses, Egyptians working as guards and scribes, and Jewish exiles from the northern kingdom of Israel, whose grandparents were marched here in the deportations of 722 BC. They speak a confusion of languages. Akkadian, written in cuneiform, remains the language of government. But on the streets, Aramaic, written in an elegant alphabet rather than wedge marks on clay, is rapidly taking over. By the end of this century, Aramaic will be the everyday tongue of almost every household in Nineveh, and Akkadian will survive only among the priests and bureaucrats. The markets are vast. The Assyrians levy tribute, not taxes, from their subject peoples, and the tribute flows here. Cedar from Lebanon, copper from Cyprus, horses from Media, ivory from Sudan, gold from Egypt, spices from Arabia, slaves from everywhere. A wealthy Assyrian family in 645 BC might eat roast mutton seasoned with imported cumin, bread baked from Anatolian wheat, honey from the Zagros, pomegranate wine from the southern estates, and fish fresh from the Tigris. The people who serve them these meals are often slaves, captured in the endless campaigns that feed the empire. Nineveh's wealth is extraordinary. It is also built, unmistakably, on terror. The Assyrian state has been perfecting the technology of mass deportation for 2 centuries. When a subject province rebels, the Assyrian response is not conquest, it is erasure. The rebellious population is removed in its entirety, broken into pieces, and scattered across the empire, where its members are resettled as tenant farmers and laborers speaking strange languages in strange lands. Over 6 generations, Assyrian kings have moved perhaps 4.5 million people in this way. The reliefs on the palace walls show this process openly. Columns of bound prisoners walking between Assyrian soldiers, scribes recording the count on tablets, the heads of executed rebels piled in heaps, flayed skins hung from city walls. There is no ambiguity about what the Assyrians believe they are doing. They are making the earth quiet by making the survivors too frightened to rebel. And the system works. Right now, in 645 BC, it is working better than it has ever worked. The empire runs from the mountains of Iran to the first cataract of the Nile. Its borders are quiet. Its treasury is full. Its king is a scholar. But the system has one flaw that nobody in Nineveh yet understands. It has no reserve. An empire built on fear requires constant demonstrations of force. The army must always be campaigning somewhere, always winning, always returning with slaves and tribute. The moment the demonstrations stop, the moment a major campaign fails, or a king's succession becomes contested, the subject peoples remember that they outnumber their masters by 20 to 1. And the Assyrians, despite all the walls and the lamassu and the lion hunts, are a small people running a very large empire. At the center of Nineveh, on the Citadel Mound, the priests perform the rituals that hold the empire together. The chief god is Ashur, the deified spirit of the old Assyrian capital, whose temple crowns the highest point of the city. Below Ashur stand Ishtar of Nineveh, the goddess of love and war, Nabu, god of writing and patron of scribes, Sin, the moon god, Shamash, the sun, and Nergal of the underworld. The relationship between the Assyrian king and these gods is precise and transactional. The king is the earthly viceroy of Ashur. His job is to expand the god's territory, punish the god's enemies, and build monuments to the god's glory. In return, Ashur gives him victory. The ritual calendar is relentless. Every day, at fixed hours, offerings are made at a dozen temples. Every new moon, every eclipse, every omen requires its own ceremony. The priests who perform these ceremonies are the only other group in the empire, besides the king himself, who are fully literate, and the palace and the temple work together in a careful, suspicious partnership. They whisper, these priests, that Sennacherib's destruction of Babylon was a crime against the gods, and that sooner or later, the gods will answer for it. In 645 BC, Nineveh feels permanent. It feels like the center of the world because it is. The walls are unbreachable. The palaces are full. The library grows larger every month. The canals flow. There is no reason to believe that any of this will change. It will change with astonishing speed. Ashurbanipal dies around 631 BC. Within a year, the empire starts to fracture. His sons fight each other for the throne. Provinces that have been quiet for a century see their moment and rebel. The Medes, the hill people of the Zagros, consolidate under a king named Cyaxares and come hunting for the empire that has tormented them for generations. Babylon rises again, this time under a Chaldean king named Nabopolassar, father of the Nebuchadnezzar who will eventually build the new Babylon. In 614 BC, the Medes sack Ashur, the religious heart of the empire. In 612 BC, the combined armies of Medes and Babylonians, joined by Scythian raiders, reach Nineveh. The siege lasts 3 months. According to the Babylonian Chronicle and the later Greek sources, the attackers could not breach the walls directly, but the Tigris River, which passed through the city, was blocked and then released, and the floodwaters tore out a section of the fortifications. The besiegers poured through the gap. What followed was the most thorough destruction of a major city in the ancient world up to that point. The palaces were burned. The temples were burned. The library, incredibly, survived because the tablets, unlike papyrus, were hardened rather than destroyed by the fire. They would lie buried under 25 centuries of sand. The last Assyrian king, Sinakaribb, died in the burning palace. His brother held out in Haran for 3 more years and then vanished from the record. The Assyrian Empire, which had terrorized the Near East for 300 years, ceased to exist in a single generation. The rebels who destroyed Nineveh did something unusual. They did not rebuild it. They did not even loot it carefully. They burned it, broke it, and left it. Within 2 generations, the ruins were already being described by travelers as strange and inexplicable. When the Greek mercenary Xenophon marched past the site in 401 BC, 2 centuries after the sack, he did not know what it was. He called it Mespila and guessed it might have been built by the Medes. The name of Nineveh had been forgotten in less than 300 years. The Hebrew prophets had their revenge. The Book of Nahum celebrates the city's fall in language of unrestrained joy. The Book of Jonah imagines a Nineveh that repents at the last moment, a city whose people are still worth saving, which is a striking thing for a small defeated nation to have written about its greatest oppressor. Today, what remains is 2 mounds on the eastern bank of the Tigris, inside the modern city of Mosul in northern Iraq. The larger mound, Kuyunjik, holds the ruins of the palaces. The smaller, Nebi Yunus, named for a shrine to the prophet Jonah that stood on it until 2014, holds the arsenal. The walls can still be traced for most of their circuit. The Lamassu from the Nergal Gate and many of the great relief panels are in the British Museum, the Louvre, and the Metropolitan Museum. The tablets of Ashurbanipal's library are scattered across the same collections, where scholars are still translating and publishing them 170 years after they were dug out of the burnt palace. Nineveh was not the first imperial capital, and it was not the last, but the things it invented have never gone away. The idea of a professional standing army, the idea of an imperial administration that communicates by written dispatch, the idea of a library as an instrument of state power, the idea of a king who reads, and most of all, the idea that it is possible to hold a vast territory together by making the cost of rebellion higher than anyone can pay. That idea did not die in 612 BC. It moved on, and it has been moving on ever since. They built a city that the world forgot, and then, because clay does not burn, the world remembered it anyway.